In this demonstration, we're going to have a look at how to deploy a read-only domain controller. Once deployed, we're then going to have a look at how we configure password replication groups. We're then going to take a look at how we can create a group to manage password replication to the remote office read-only domain controller. Following that, we're going to have a look at how to configure a password replication policy for the remote office, then evaluate the resulting password replication policy, and finish off by having a look at monitoring credential caching. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is we're just going to create a computer account for the read-only domain controller, and to do that we just right-click the domain controller's organisational unit within the domain to which you want to deploy the domain controller to, and then you can see when you right-click the domain controller's OU you have an option to pre-create the read-only domain controller account. So I'm just going to select that, which then kicks off the wizard for the Active Directory Domain Services installation. From there I'm going to click on Next. Again, I'm just going to click on Next. I'm going to run through the wizard and generate the account using my current logged on credentials. Click on Next. From here, I'm going to type in the name of the computer that we're going to be promoting to a read-only domain controller. Click on Next. It's now just checking the computer name just to make sure it is unique. And then on this screen, it's just listing the sites within Active Directory to which can deploy the new domain controller to. Now I've only currently got one site, which is the default first site name, so I'm just going to click on Next again. It's now just examining DNS, just to make sure we've got an appropriate DNS infrastructure in place, to which I'm just going to temporarily pause the video because this might take a moment or two. Okay, and now it's just asking us if we want to deploy additional options to the domain controller as well. I am going to make it a DNS server, and I'm also going to make it a global catalog server as well. Click on Next. From here, I'm going to configure permissions to allow a user from the IT department to be able to promote the computer to a read-only domain controller. So I'm just going to type in the name of the domain, /IT. Just check that, make sure that department exists, which it does. Click on OK. Click on Next. Summary page, that just shows us the choices that were made during the wizard. That's fine. Click on Next. Click on Finish, and you can see now we've got a new computer account for what's going to be the read-only domain controller. So now I've switched to LON Server 1, which is the machine to which we've created the read-only domain controller computer account for in Active Directory. I'm logged on as the local administrator there. I'm just going to open up Server Manager, and what we're going to do is we're going to install the Active Directory Domain Services role. So from Server Manager, if I click on Manage, then select Add Roles and Features. From here, just click on Next. From here, we're going to select role-based or feature-based installation. Select Next from here. From here, we're going to install the ADDS on LON Server 1, so that's fine, that's what's selected there. Click on Next. From here, there's a list of roles. As we said, we're going to install Active Directory Domain Services. We're just going to accept the default features that it chooses to add as well. And then from here, select Next. Select Next again. Select Next again. And then from here, finally, finish on by clicking on Install. Now, all this is doing at the moment is configuring, installing the binaries for Active Directory Domain Services. It's going to take a few minutes, so I'm just going to pause the video, and then once it's installed, we'll come back and do the final configuration of the machine. Okay, so that's the installation of Active Directory completed. So I'm just going to click on Close now. Like so. I'm then just going to click on the notification flag at the top there, and if we click on that, you can see that it's now given us the option to be able to promote the server to become a domain controller. So I'm just going to select that. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a domain controller to an existing domain. So first of all, we need to identify the name of the domain to which we want to add the domain controller to. I'm also going to specify the credentials of the user account that's got the rights to be able to do this, and if you remember, a short while ago I gave users of the IT admin department the ability to be able to do this. So I'm going to type in the user account April, type in a password, just prefix that with the name of the domain, click on OK. And then in a few moments time we should see the adatum.com domain appear. Like so. So I'm going to select the domain, click on OK. From here, click on Next. Now you can see that now that it's actually discovered the read-only domain controller account that we created for this computer. I'm just going to close that. Okay, and then from underneath it, it's giving me the option: do I want to use that existing read-only domain controller account, or do I just want to do a fresh install and configuration of the domain controller? Well, I obviously want to do the existing read-only domain controller account, and with that selected there, you can see that the options that we selected during the initial wizard when we created the account, they're all greyed out, so we can't change those from here. I'm then going to type in the password for the directory services restore mode. So if I do need to reboot the host without, if I do need to reboot the server without Active Directory running, we boot into what's called Active Directory restore mode, and we have to log on as a local administrator account, and this is the password that I'm defining for that there. Click on Next. From here, it's asking us that when we deploy this replica domain controller, where do we want to replicate existing Active Directory information from? So it's saying any domain controller within the domain by default. If I click on the drop down there, we could choose a specific domain controller. I've only got one domain controller in the domain at the moment, so regards to the options there, that's where it's going to replicate from. Click on Next, and then from here, I'm just going to click on Next again. It's just identifying where it's going to store the Active Directory database, the log files, and also the default locations for the sysvol folder structure as well. Just going to go with the defaults there. So click on Next. From here again, showing us a summary of the choices that we made within the wizard. Click on Next. It's just performing some final prerequisites. As you can see, they've all checked out and passed. So I'm now just going to click on Install, and that will then configure the Active Directory services as a read-only domain controller. Okay, now this is going to take a good few minutes, so I'm just going to pause the video and then return once it's completed. Okay, so we've now deployed the read-only domain controller. That's now rebooted. I've just logged back into the RODC1, the original domain controller for the domain, and I've opened up Active Directory users and computers. And if we just have a look at the users container, just to show you that within there are a couple of groups. You've got an allowed read-only domain controller password replication group and a denied read-only domain controller password replication group. Now, difference between the two is that if you become a member or are made a member of the allowed RODC password replication group, then that means that any read-only domain controllers within that domain, your passwords will automatically be replicated to. Whereas if you're a member of the denied read-only domain controller password replication group, then as it mentions there, members of that group cannot have their passwords replicated to any read-only domain controllers in the domain. And if you're a member of both of those groups, it's going to still make sure that your passwords do not get replicated to domain controllers within the domain. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called the Remote Office Users Group, and I'm just going to create this group within the Research OU. So I'm going to create the group, and like we say, we're going to call it Remote Office Users Group. Remote Office Users, that'll do. It's a global group, and it's a security as opposed to a distribution group. So I'm just going to click on OK there. Now I'm just going to modify the membership of that group, and I'm just going to add some users to it. So if we just go into the properties of the group, click on the members tab, I'm now going to add in 4 user accounts to which I want to be able to replicate their passwords for their user accounts to the read-only domain controller. So I'm just going to type in those usernames. Like so. I'll just check those, make sure they are there. Yep, that's fine. And I'm also going to add in the computer account loncl1 so that that will also get its password replicated to the read-only domain controller as well. Before I do that, just need to click on object types, make sure we select computers from here. So then if I try to find it now, there we go, you can see it's found that. Click on OK, click on OK again. So now what we're going to do then is we're going to go back to the domain controller's organisational unit. I'm now going to right click the LON server 1 computer account. I'm then going to go into the properties of that. You can see there's a number of tabs within there. I'm going to select the password replication policy, and when you go to the password replication policy you can see a number of default groups within there, and you can see whether or not they're allowed to replicate their passwords to this read-only domain controller. Now you can see that of the groups that are listed, they're all saying that they deny user accounts and computer accounts within those groups to replicate passwords, except for the allow read-only domain controllers password group that we mentioned. That's the only one that will allow members of it to replicate passwords to the read-only domain controller. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click on add, and then from here we're going to specify to allow passwords for the account to replicate to this read-only domain controller. We're then going to click on OK, and then from here we're going to specify our remote users group. So I'll just type in remote, click on check names, there's our remote office users group, click on OK, click on OK, and you can see now they've been, when I find it, there we go, you can see now they've been added to the list, and also they've got the allow permission as well, so it will replicate members of that group, users or computers, to the read-only domain controller. Okay, just click on apply there. Okay, now what we're going to do is, now I've added that group, we're going to just click on the advanced button down here. You can see there's a couple of tabs at the top there. I'm just going to click on resultant policy, and what this allows you to do is type in a particular user account, and it will let you know whether or not they're able to replicate their passwords to this read-only domain controller. So I'm going to click on add, and then I'm going to type in the user account Aziz, who we had added to the group. If I then just click on check names, make sure he exists, click on OK, and you can see it's now come back and it's saying that it has or will allow his password to be replicated to this read-only domain controller. Okay, so now that we've specified that we want to be able to cache passwords from members of the remote office users group, we're just going to check that, and I'm going to check that by just going back to my LON server 1 virtual machine. Okay, I'm going to log in as Aziz. Now I do expect this to fail for the simple reason that it doesn't have rights to be able to log on to the domain controller, but regardless it should still cache his password on the domain controller. So as you saw, that did fail, but if we now go back to LON DC1, if we just open up the properties of LON server 1 again, like so, if I then go into the advanced button on the password replication policy tab, from here you can see we've got the policy usage tab selected at the top there. Down under here we've got a drop down, and selected there is accounts whose passwords are stored on this read-only domain controller, and you can see there we've now got the user account Aziz. So that's just proving the point that even though he didn't manage to log on, it's still caching his passwords locally on this domain controller. Now what we can also do is we can also pre-populate passwords as well. So if without having a user actually log on to LON server 1, if I want to make sure that their password already is cached on here, you can see we've got the button there, pre-populate passwords. So I'm just going to select that like so, and then from here I'm just going to type in the user account Louise, who is also a member of the remote users group. Click on check names, click on OK. It's now saying, do you wish to send the current passwords for these accounts to the read-only domain controller now? So yes, I do. Click on that. Passwords for all accounts were successfully pre-populated. Click on OK, and we can now see that it is now caching her password on here as well. That's the end of this demonstration. Thank you.